Everyone, welcome to the Moga Bar Show. My name's Gabe, and with me I have a very special guest, Wesley Faulkner. Wesley is someone who is in the tech industry, but that doesn't just do him justice. He has somebody that has been very vocal about neurodivergent issues and policies in not only the workplace, but society as a whole. Wesley, thank you for joining me, sir. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. Thank you for calling me a special person on my special day. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And happy birthday as well. So
Old.
we're all old. we're all getting older every day. You have a very unique experience. And what I mean by that is you work in the tech industry. This is an industry that has been historically, I don't want to say unforgiving, but it's been very cruel to people that don't conform to a certain way, which is the irony is that the tech industry does not conform to normal business standards. Yet everyone in the tech industry is, or at least in the Silicon Valley and the people in the higher ups needs to conform to a certain way of being. And you're a Black man, neurodivergent, and you're in the tech industry. Can we talk about that for a second? What has this experience been like for you? You're neurodivergent, but you weren't always vocal about it. How has your career shifted or been affected, if it has been at all, since you've come out?
So funny that you bring that up. I don't think it's hurt me, but you mentioned, that I'm a Black man, I'm in tech. But I have to say that this is a point of privilege at this point to be able to say that, because I am more solidified in my career, and I've gone or made it far enough to be able to feel pretty secure to be able to say that. I can't say I felt the same years ago. It has hurt me with previous employers, but not at the where you would think. Not during the interviewing, but mostly during, I think, the same thing that when people think about other kind of diversity, when they bring you in, they don't necessarily, they say they're welcoming to others, but what they want is assimilation into the current structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when there's conflict saying, hey, we love diverse thought, we love diverse approaches, but this is how we do it. So you can be different, but you have to like mold to this template that we've already established. So the rigidity in how the company operates does not really allow for diversity of thought or diversity of presentation. My specific diversity is, or neurodiversity is, I'm ADHD and I'm also dyslexic. So I can talk all day. I can give presentations, fine. But you want me to write a long white paper, that's going to be really hard for me. So I can explain things and make it clear and understandable verbally, but when it comes to maybe doing the same amount of work using text, I'm not as articulate. My vocabulary is extremely limited. I think it's equivalent to losing several IQ points by just me trying to do the mental load of just putting in writing.
Which is the funny thing is, and here's my take on that. I don't see that as a disability or a disadvantage. In my opinion, if you can speak to something, if you can talk to me and help me understand something better, I think that makes you immensely more qualified than if you're writing something out. Because I think anyone, well, not anyone, but I think a majority of people can write better than they talk. And what I mean by that is you can write it out, research it, write it out, write your white papers, write great, text, 10, 20, 30 pages. But if you can't have a conversation about it, defending what you wrote or, explaining it, eloquently, articulating it, do you really know it? Do you, and so I feel it's a shame because they don't see the benefit of both. I think that if anything, that creates another opportunity for somebody like, hey, yeah, you need a technical writer, somebody that can write, the technical aspect of it, write the scope, write whatever it is that needs to be written. And then you have that person that is very much the face of it, that can be communicate clearly, like I can't do right now. And just, you know, say, hey, this is the thought that I'm trying to get across. This is the purpose of this specific white paper. Now hit me with your questions, come on, let's go. I think that speaks, I mean, yes, in an ideal world, I would love to be able to have both. I think I'm not necessarily diagnosed as dyslexic or ADHD, but I'm probably the same way because I can't write as good as I can talk. I know you can't tell that right now, but I'm always trying. I can have a conversation better. If you ask me to write down something and explain it in detail, I'm sure I can get there. I am going to need some help, a lot of proofreading and copywriting, and going to my wife, can you check this? Does this make sense? And I just think that if you can do what you said you do, that's so valuable to me, and I respect that so much more.
My brain feels, this is how it feels internally anyway. I don't know what actually is going on, but I have so many thoughts sequentially and all at the same time, and it switches between those two, where I have to follow a path, like if I this, then this, and this, and that makes sense to me. But at the same time, all these branches go off on that same path of like, oh, I can do it this way or this way, and then still move forward. So the point where if I try to write it down, I feel overwhelmed by the amount of ways that I can portray or kind of explain the thing that I need to write down, and it comes out as a jumble mess. So when I'm speaking with someone and I'm able to feed off their reaction, their specific line of business,
Mm-hmm.
their use case, I'm able to input those, anchor those into what I know is fact. And that allows me to really streamline my approach and how I explain it, which makes it more tailor made to the person I'm speaking with and
Mm-hmm.
speaking to. And I can adjust based on they add clarifications or more pressing questions of what they feel is more important. And it's easier for me to adjust that way in a conversation than rather than write it down. It's like, oh, but I said that it was a constant, but if they put it outside, it could be a variable. But I could go either way, but it all depends on the application, because the general technical response is it depends, and that it depends translates into writing to a whole bunch of stuff that just is confusing. But conversationally, but speaking with someone, it's just easier for me to make it more real, more tangible to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm able to hold it in my brain and feel it and touch it and rotate it. And from that, it makes it easier for me to explain rather than this abstract that I can't really put a pen in on paper.
Now, what was the response? Let's go back a
So
few years, and you come
let me,
out. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
there was one company, and that was only one company ago, that during the interview process, and I
Mm-hmm.
told them that I was dyslexic and have ADHD, and it was like, great. My manager at the time was extremely embracing of that fact. Gave me a lot of leeway, allowed me to lean into the things that I felt like I was good at.
Mm-hmm.
And she saw my potential. She saw where I actually could be a benefit, not just in terms of diversity from like my race, but from diversity of thought, because what I was presenting and how I understood things and how I explained them back were just so much different than the rest of the team, that it would help with making the team more well-rounded. So we can approach different people depending on where they were. My manager then got let go. They got fired. I got moved to another team, and this team did the same spiel. Hey, thank you for having me on the team. Here's who I am. And that was heard and then thrown away. And repeatedly over and over and over again, I was told, well, that doesn't make sense. Just do it this way. Can't you see that um, where you could do better? It felt very demeaning,
Of
shame
course.
inducing.
Yeah,
It was really, really hard on me. And so it went from like the perfect dream job to my own personal hell
of
almost
course.
overnight.
Now, do you find that, I mean, well, obviously, yes, but the stigma that's attached to someone that is neurodiverse, how is it possible, if it even is possible, for us to change their minds about us? Because something that I heard you say a while ago, and I think it was at the Berlin meetup last year, where you said it is not your job to fit in, but to make them accept you.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that, because you're absolutely right. It's, they need to accept you for who you are. We should accept everyone for who they are. It's not a like,
Mhm.
no, I need you to fit into what I'm doing here. It's my job as an employer, or teammate, to, welcome you in with open arms, be like, Wesley, let's come, let's go, let's do this.
Mhm.
Um, how how do you see that going? Like, is it even, are you making any headway? Is it possible? Because sometimes it feels like it's not.
I'm gonna rip something from the headlines kind of and throw it in
Okay,
here.
sure.
If it might be a little controversial, so feel free to uh,
Absolutely.
tell me to not touch it anymore. But
Go for it.
Basecamp,
Yes, I've heard of,
um,
yeah.
Basecamp released saying no politics, whatever they define that as, no political speech in their company, and then a third to half of the employees decided to leave.
Hmm.
I think that is a sign that when you aren't able to listen to your employees and hear their needs, that it's not something that's going to help in terms of sustaining your company.
Hmm.
It's gonna hurt recruitment and retention. And I believe, or at least I hope, that is going to be the trend going forward. So let's talk about how Basecamp relates to neurodiversity, so, and political speech even. I mentioned this in a podcast, in a clubhouse room actually yesterday, about um, the fault when saying no political discussions is because it derails our mission. What that illustrates is disagreement is something we don't want to deal with or hear about, because they're measuring that as an chaos. It's
Hmm.
instilling chaos, so we want to avoid it. And what they really should be doing, if they're really truly a leadership company and trying to enhance their product with diversity of thought, they could talk about, we had this many conflicts, this is how many resolutions we got to. Because the skill of transitioning disagreement to either collaboration or compromise is something that is uh, it's a skill that will, if you can master it, will help you in all kinds of forums, customer service, sales, even when you're on uh, a reporting call of your current quarterly earnings, talking to analysts about where your company is going to go and where it's come from, being able to figure out how to navigate that friction will help you in all kinds of formats and settings. When you're dealing with someone who's neurodiverse, they may be presenting something that in their head they know it's true. How they can explain it, that's going to be maybe hard depending on what we're talking about. But being open and hearing them out, listing, here's what I heard, here's the parts where I'm lost, help me understand that. Okay, here's my belief structure. I can see we agree here, I see we disagree here. What is the pathway that you got to that conclusion? And this is how I got to it. So they're both valid, maybe, depending on the setting or the person, or there's a different view because of upbringing, or like country of origin. There's all of these differences that shape us as people, that have us have the same experiences, um, or go through the same path but experiencing them differently. It's like if you ever got into an argument with a spouse or a significant other, and then you're talking about what the other person said, or you're describing it to your friends, and your stories seem dramatically different, even though you're
Yeah.
both in the same argument.
Yeah.
It's because if you don't fight for that resolution, you don't say, "Here's what I did wrong. Here's how I can change and be better." When you're saying, "I just don't want to hear any conflict," you're throwing that away. So, in terms of neurodiversity, like there are people who are autistic that are nonverbal. You can see in the news people who are having mental problems or are differently abled having really bad encounters with the cops and law enforcement because they're trying to rule that situation with force and power and trying to take control of it, as opposed to figuring out what is going on and slowing down and letting space handle the de-escalation. And when you don't have that from a company who leadership at the top saying, "We don't want to hear about it, we'll only talk about what we care about," we're in a knowledge economy. And if you're not open to new ideas, guess what? New ideas are going to stop coming and your business is going to suffer for it. It's
Yeah.
the lifeblood of a company. New ideas, new ways of thinking, new ways of approaching things, I think is what we all should strive to do. And when you're thinking about neurodiversity, that's exactly what we do best.
Yeah. And I think, that you say that, we're in a knowledge economy. Um, the irony of all of this again is, tech companies that, uh, they put themselves on this pedestal as this altruistic form of business where everyone, hey, we're better than traditional businesses, the monopolies of years gone by. We care about people, humanity. We're building tools to make things better. Yet you have this, situation unfolding with Basecamp. And, it's just, it's unfortunate. It's sad, but then it's like you touched on something with the cops where it's just like it's the same situation. They don't know how to handle something, the cops and the business leaders. It's almost the same mentality. They don't know how to handle something, so it's just we'll do what we know to do. It's business as usual. We'll do what we've always done because that's what we know to do. So they're not trying to learn anything new. And you think about in the past however many years, because this isn't just a recent thing, this has gone back many, many decades. um the controversies, the tragedies that could have been avoided had you just sought a little bit of knowledge or understanding. We all want to be understood. We all want that piece of, hey, I belong here. I want you to understand what I'm saying. And it seems sometimes like now is the time for everything to happen. But I feel that, now where we're in a society that people are openly talking about, diversity, and, inclusivity, but no one's talking about neurodiversity.
Mhm.
Yes, I mean, they are starting to talk about it now. I'm looking online and I'm seeing that the conversations are happening. We're in Mental Health Awareness Month. Um, the conversations are starting to be had, but we're a long ways off. And I understand why, because the conversations we're just starting to make headway on the race diversity issue, which has for so long been the dominant diversity issue. But, if we're going all in, shouldn't we just go all in on all of them and just say, hey, like, let's attach this one to this and let's just go all in. It's not the same, but let's just try to address all of them while we can. Let's address neurodiversity. It's not the same as racial diversity, but it is a diversity issue that people are being discriminated against. There's a stigma attached to it for all races. That if you can't speak as quickly, or you can't speak at all, or you can't read something the right way, that, oh, he's slow, he's dumb, or she, it's what do we it seems like we're not getting away from that, because that's still there. That's still very prevalent. The first thing that comes up when, I write something stupid, it's just like, oh, what are you, stupid? And it's like, it's not that I'm writing something stupid. I want to correct myself, but I'm writing something that's perceived as stupid because I wrote it very quickly, not realizing my typos or just trying to get a thought out. And who knows what I wrote. And it's just like a bunch of letters, and it gets lost. um and the first thing that comes up is, oh, come on, man, what are you, stupid? Like, is your spell
Hmm.
check not working? Like, what's going on? And it's just like, well, you know you try to laugh about it, and it's really like, listen, man, I was writing quickly. I don't have that. Clearly my motor skills were not keeping up with my brain and what I was doing. And it's like, so what? I feel like there's still so much to do. And I know that, you've said this to me in the past, that you're not the authority on it. You're someone who's just speaking about it. But what can we do to direct people to like the right situation? I feel that a lot of companies with these diversity groups we're having, ERGs, employee resource groups, for, Latinos, for, Blacks, for Asians, for the LGBTQ community, but there's nothing necessarily for the neurodiverse community. At least I have not seen that from everything that I've seen at companies when I see them put out tweets and promotional stuff talking about what they're doing internally. I've not seen anything for neuro diversity. And a lot of these places now, they have a chief diversity officer or someone who's running that for them. How do we bring that to the attention? Because I know that, especially with everything that's gone on the past year, so many people are focusing on the racial issue of diversity. How do we bring it back? It's like, hey, we're not saying to stop focusing on that, but what we're saying is, let's also talk about this, because it seems like that's getting lost. And it just seems that the more you talk about something that no one else is talking about, like what you said, it's like, well, this is what we're focusing on now, so you need to focus on this as well. It's like, well,
I
that's not
think,
diversity.
yeah, leadership. I'm sure you've heard the saying, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yes.
And leadership comes from a place of control and power, but it'd be nice if it came from care and concern. And the embodiment of care and concern is something that's contagious when it comes from leadership.
Mm,
So if leadership, in terms of the the base camp example, it says we are going to control everything and we're right because we're leadership, instead of saying we're going to care for you and we're concerned about your well-being. That's a different kind of leadership. And it's no coincidence that the ERGs were disbanded right when um, this policy change came out,
yeah.
because they go hand in hand. I've been in several different companies, and when I ask about neurodiversity, usually it's synonymous with autism. Oh yeah, we believe in neurodiversity. So if you're autistic, we'd love to have you. And it was back. It's equivalent to back in the day when they talked about diversity. It means, oh, we need to add more women. There's a
Yeah.
shorthand when things are just now starting, where people don't understand the full spectrum or rainbow of inclusion that should be at the table when making these decisions. And from talking to different leaderships, not related to the companies that I've worked for, but there seems to be two types of categories that I've found most prevalent when talking about neurodiversity and highlighting those issues and finding a way to make inclusion at the forefront of the companies that they have control or some sort of influence over. One, from just the general employees, they hide that part of them because they don't want to be further discriminated against, especially if they're a person of color. And two, they're a person who is in leadership who don't want it to show as a weakness, or they feel like they have found a way to overcome, quote unquote, their disability, and so they don't even need to talk about it. And if leadership is not willing to talk about it, they're setting that same example of control and power instead of vulnerability that will show care and concern.
Yeah.
Not just for themselves, but showing an example of how they want others to follow in their footsteps. There's no mystery about what happened at Uber when the Travis Kalanick was there, and he flaunted the roles of local governors and municipalities to try to roll out his services to all of these different locations. He didn't care about the rules, and then that was reflected internally in their company. So when a company says that they don't care about politics or all these other concerns not related to the business because they feel that those two are separate, people care about their fellow people. But if they feel like all the other masses aren't part of their kin, then that kind of is separating, saying we don't care about those people, which in fact is very selfish. But when you see all of humanity, or all of, even let's just say all of your customer base as humans or people you care about, and especially, and then beyond that, your employees of people that you care about, that allows like room for people to talk about things that they might have shame around. And let's face it, neurodiversity is something that can have a lot of shame. If you were told that you were slow, if you're told you're dumb, if you're told or called names growing up because you didn't get a reference, or you're slower to react, or you found a different way of doing something that people thought was strange, or like combinations of textures or foods or smells bothered you, or lights, people would call people out for that, and still do. And there's a lot of stigma, and that just reinforces you can't be yourself, you can't show who you are. So ERGs, who are companies that want people to show up as their whole selves, need to create these groups so that people can find people they gravitate towards. And you know what happens when you gravitate people in a group at work? They're able to share their experiences, share some of their concerns, like, hey, the HR categories don't match who I identify as. Let's make a change. That information and that work is done to help the company be better, and makes it easier for most people. So ERGs don't just bring people of diverse thoughts and feelings together, but that work actually helps the company. And if you're creating a product that you know needs iteration, you need bug fixing, and you need to make sure it gets better, why would you not have the same approach with your employees and your products and your customers and everybody in the world?
Yeah,
We need to change
absolutely.
this. We need to make it better. And if you include more people who can work at your company, guess what? You can employ more people, get more ideas. And that can also increase the customer base, saying, let's make it accessible, not just the people in the company, but everybody. And guess what? That opens you up to more customers. There's business cases right and left for diversity. And it's not just proven in terms of what's good, but it's what's profitable. So when you think about, there's no profit motive for preventing people from being included in your company. There's no intrinsic like ego motive. You don't feel better for feeling like you're not including people. There's no ethical reasons for not including people. So that brings back to leadership who feel either scared or undermined by allowing diverse opinion, diverse thought, and even neurodiversity into their company.
And that's extremely unfortunate. They have no idea what they're missing out on, because so many different societies in the world, so many different cultures, so many different opinions, so many different insights to, provide a better overall solution for whatever it is that they're developing, or, product they're selling, service they're selling, whatever. So I just imagine how much better things could be if it were that way. I want to pivot really quick, because, you know, we both mentioned, the stigma and the shame, you know, traditionally associated with being neurodiverse or just being different, period. Because, when you're younger, especially when we were growing up in the 80s, we didn't know what neurodiversity was. Maybe we were different potentially, or maybe we did or saw things differently. So we didn't know what it was. Can you touch on a bit on what it's like for you, first generation American, son of immigrants? Your parents are literally right next door from my parents. And what was it like for you to tell your family that you were neurodiverse, or was it something that was just sort of like, did it need to be said? Was it just something like, yeah, okay? Um, what was that like?
Wow, that's hard. Uh, my dad came from a place that, machismo was, you know,
Yeah.
it was the way of being, and masculinity was built into doing things the right way. I got slapped if I picked something up with my left hand, for instance. Not in the face, but my hand got slapped. And so I had a lot of tendencies of doing things that were new and different, putting things together, finding like spare parts or things that are discarded and rearranging them. And there was a lot of shame of me acting in a way that people thought was weird or didn't make sense to them. And my mom was one that was trying to support me, but also, when you mentioned limited understanding of neurodiversity, I mean, immigrants, and my mom also was like, the concept didn't really dawn on her too, that I was different. She just knew I was different. It was like, oh, that's just Wesley, but there was no name for it. And my diagnosis didn't happen until I left and went to college. And so it was later on in life. So things were hard for me. I felt alone. I felt like an anomaly. I felt we grew up in a religious house. We were Catholic, and I was wondering why God did this to me. Is there another purpose that I just haven't come upon, to make me this way that's so different from everyone else? And funny, religion actually was a big comfort for me, knowing that Jesus was scorned, Jesus was rebuked by a lot of different people and the establishment. And then later on, like, we looked to him as inspiration for not being so conformant and speaking truth to power. And so that helped me get through my adolescence. But everyone wants to be accepted
Absolutely.
by their peers. I as soon as I got my diagnosis, I felt like I was part of a group. I felt like I was part of a bigger thing. And hearing the statistics blew my mind. Instead of dyslexia specifically, there's like 1 in 5 people are dyslexic, so 20% of the population. And it's just like, if 20% of the people have this, where are they? I don't see them, which also in some ways reinforced
Yeah.
the shame because no one's talking about it.
Yeah. Nobody. Yeah. Yeah. I can totally see that. Oh man, it's the irony of you saying that when you would pick stuff up with your left hand. I'm a natural lefty. My parents, Dominican, they tied my left hand up so that I would only use my right hand. So I'm actually ambidextrous now. So it actually helped me in hindsight, not on purpose, but it did help me. But that was the mentality, like, not, I mean, my father, again, it's the same island. We're from the same island, just a little slight division, but it was the same way. So it's funny to hear you say that. I don't think I've ever heard anyone else ever say that. Like, when I've told the story in the past, everybody just looks at me and I'm like, all right, I guess it's just me. I was like, all right. I was like,
Right. And
sure,
there's
fine.
also a culture of conforming to the country you're in, like not
Yeah.
to stand out because it could cause problems or death in some.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly.
there's a very strong fit in kind of culture too.
Absolutely. Oh man. So, all right. So moving on, it's interesting to hear you say that. I don't hear a lot of people talk about them relying on their faith. If some I find have shunned God or shunned religion, but you actually went the opposite way, which I find, refreshing. And it's different than what I've heard people say. So it's like, it's not the typical, but um I find that to be very refreshing because, it's just, yeah, a lot of people do that. A lot of people have that feeling and you want to
Mhm.
hold on to something. And a lot of times that's our base as well. You hold on to your base, what you were raised in, potentially what you know to be good. What was it like? Fast forward, you're married now, what was this like for you? Talking to your spouse, saying, here I am, this is me. Obviously
Mhm.
got to know you, and it's not just like, hey, by the way, I'm neurodiverse. It's like, okay, sorry, I can't talk to you. It's not, that's not the way that it works. It's like you guys get to know each other. It's
Mhm.
traditional. We're in the same age range, so it's just like, traditional dating. It wasn't the online dating, swiping left or right, and going through and saying, oh, he's neurodiverse, I can't talk to
Mhm.
him. What was that experience?
Okay, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I am a little bit. I'm pretty charismatic, so uh,
There you go.
so I can turn it on when I need to, which is really good. And so at the beginning, it was like not part of the conversation. You're getting to know each other, but as you progress in a relationship, people, at least for me, most generally people, when their stress self is different than their non-stress self. And my symptoms of ADHD really come out when I'm in a stress condition. It's hard for me to think straight. It's hard for me to do the right thing. In retrospect, when I look back, it's like, oh, why didn't I do that? And I beat myself over. I was like, oh, I should have done that. I should have said this. Oh, that makes more sense. And so I think when I was in that environment and then I changed, that was easier to show the difference between when I am in a calm state as opposed to a stress state, and also having to reinforce, you know, I might act a little different than what you're used to. I might think differently, and that's okay. And luckily, my significant other, my wife, she's extremely smart. She's a researcher, and so that made things a lot easier to be able to supply materials or like even a name or a diagnosis, and help navigate some of the differences, like
Yes.
because funny, there's a lot of books on different types of neurodiversity, like what is dyslexia, what is ADHD, what is autism, what is PTSD. There's different books of it,
Yeah.
but there are no books about this is what a neurotypical person is. And so uh, I can read a book about dyslexia or even ADHD and be like, yep, 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 yep. And it's just reaffirming a lot of things. But I wish I had a book on neurotypical people so I can say, oh, really? So that's how they work and that's how they operate. So I can be able to be a better steward of saying, here's how you probably operate and here's how I'm different. There's not a big, there's not an outline of kind of like carving out where conflicts might happen that I'm necessarily aware of. But when they do happen and I explain things and then because I'm sure like if you read a book about neurodiversity, about some sort of condition, you're like, well, doesn't everyone think that way? Just like when I see a really bright light, I cover my eyes. Doesn't everyone do that? Some people have different reactions for
Yeah.
different stimuli. Some people work differently. So it took those it was painful. It was not smooth. Those pain points of like having the same stimuli or being in the same environment and then having some different reactions and then being able to be close enough to come at it with an openness and with a clarity of saying, hey, this is something, so also a little bit of humbleness of like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. This is my experience. With the sense of shame that we talked about before, it didn't start off that way. A lot of it's like, well, you didn't explain it clearly, or why did you do it in this order? You do compliment then criticism instead of criticism then compliment, or there's a ways of approaching things that felt really harsh to me, and my reaction wasn't like, oh, that hurts my feelings. My reaction is, you did that wrong. And so it took a lot of repair to have that, to keep that reaction, that defensiveness that I built over the years of trying to protect myself from all the criticisms. They're telling me that I was wrong, or there's something I was doing wrong. I was like, no, 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 no. You're doing you're doing something wrong. You're the one who's not working in a way that's relevant to me. So having that humbleness of saying there are going to be some differences, I didn't approach that a way that was from a caring place. It was more blaming and trying to turn the tide and putting all those feelings onto you. That took a lot of work, and that's something that's, it's going to take work probably for the whole entire rest of our relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every relationship, every friendship is a constant work in progress. It's never the finality, and hopefully it's never the finality, because that just means it's over. But it's just, a constant work in progress. I know I'm personally always working on myself, but what's next for Wesley Faulkner? You've been a voice for neurodiversity for a few years now. I came to know you last year again when I heard you at the Berlin meetup, and ever since then I was just kind of checking out what you're doing, the different podcasts that you were on, and I that's why I wanted to speak to you. What's next for you? I know that this isn't all that you do. You're in the tech industry, you talk tech a lot and very well. What is next for you? Because you have so much going on personally and professionally. Where are you going? Like what's your next thing to do? Because it's a work in progress, like we said. So the struggle to be accepted or have people acknowledge and understand what neurodiversity is never going to be over. But what's the next step?
I mentioned that void of voices or people talking about neurodiversity when I was looking for support, when I was searching. I hope to give more voice to the voiceless, and more comfort to the people who need it. My
I think
goal is to like find I'm still finding my own voice, finding my own rhythm, and I am going to keep talking until nobody wants to hear it, or that it's so boring because everyone already has that message. The work will never be done, but maybe it will be done by someone other than me, and hopefully I can help pass the torch or lay bricks to create a path for people to follow what I'm doing. I'm not the first to do this. I'm not the best, but I just hope to just like add to the course. Hopefully that will be so deafening that no one can ignore us and going in the, further. And, ultimately I want to make the world a better place for my kids, my kids. And the best I can do is just to keep talking until someone shuts me up.
Well, if I have anything to do about it, you're always welcome to talk to me with me. We'll record it, put it out there. Hopefully someone's listening, but I think you're doing a great job. I really do. I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but in closing, where can people find you if they want to reach you? You're in so many different places, but I'll let them hear from you first.
Right now, I'm working for a company called Daily, so daily.co. I will represent them in multiple spaces and conferences. So if you look for them, most likely you'll find me. I'm also on Twitter, which is my preferred medium of contact. So Wesley83 on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn, but I prefer you not to contact me on LinkedIn. When I do a podcast, I try to say that because a lot of people try to connect with me. My community and my contacts are really important. So when people reach out on LinkedIn, I like to say, if I look at your name and I can't vouch for you, that means I usually don't add you to LinkedIn. So I prefer not to be contacted there. But Yeah, if you find me on Twitter, you send me a message. My DMs are open. I'm willing to speak at your conference, willing to speak to your company, willing to really give counsel to those who are neurodivergent and looking to make a difference out in the world. So reach out to me. I want to hear your voice, and if possible, make your voice louder.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thank you, Gay.